Hello, welcome. It's Tuesday at 2 o'clock and it is time for Transformation Tuesday. If this is your first time here, please introduce yourself in the comments. I would love to meet you. I am Stephanie Doyer. If this is not your first time, then say hey, and if you're catching this on the replay, then just say replay so that I know that you saw it and I can say hey. So this week we are going to be talking about permission to rest. But before we do, let's do a little bit of a recap. So what is Transformation Tuesday about? Transformation Tuesday is about real life moments and real life experiences that I've had and that many of you have reached out and shared with me and or said, yes, I've had something very similar and or that you can relate to something that I'm sharing. So this is all about real life moments, real life experiences. We've talked about prayers. We've talked about dreams. We've talked about freedom. We've talked about remembrance when you're in between the moments, remembering those, honoring those. We've talked about wisdom and when wisdom and freedom intersect. And last time we talked about emotional changes that happen in a moment when you give yourself the permission to be honest. And as honest as you can be, the freer you get and the faster you get that freedom. And so today we're going to be talking about permission to rest. So last week was a rest week, which is kind of why we're going into the topic of rest. So last week was just a week that I kind of felt like I needed a week to just kind of take a breath and I kind of catch up and to just see how things were working out, like what was going on with like summer's here. I know summer's here for a lot of people, what's going on with schedules, like what's going on in just the season of life, and to see what would be the best going forward. And that week I just needed a break. Ideally it would have been the perfect week to have a life because my kids were gone and it was just me, so there wasn't any interruptions. But this is something that I have found to be true with just motherhood in general or parenting in general, is that whenever you have a moment where you know you're going to be kid-free, whether you are going out of town someplace and or they are staying at grandparents' house, you think, oh, I'm going to get so much done, and or oh, I can do XYZ. I can meet up with a friend. I can finally get that project done. I can finally do this. And what you realize is when that moment comes, you just realize how tired you are and how much you just want to rest. And so that has been an ongoing theme throughout parenting. It's just realizing that I need moments to rest and then giving myself permission to do so. So if any of this resonates with you, my 3 favorite emojis in the whole wide world are the white heart, just gives me all the feels, and then the fire flame, just means that something's really, really resonating with you, and or the glitter, just all the sparkle. Okay, so anything at any time resonates, drop me any one of those 3 and I will know that it's heading home for you and that we're on the same page and that this is good stuff. So, all right, so let's talk about permission to rest. So I've noticed that whenever I have those moments where I'm going to be kid-free and I think, oh, I'm going to get this done, I just really just realize, you know what, I think a better use of my time would just be to do nothing. And it took a while to get to that place where I was able to give myself the permission to just do nothing without feeling guilty that I should be doing something or I should be using that time to be productive, but I couldn't. And or when the time came, I didn't even want to. Like I wanted to just to be still. I have a personality type where I can go and I can get stuff done, but then there's a time where I am done and I need to just sit back and rest. So last week was one of those weeks, and I thought it was perfect to bring it into this week because I am going to make a couple of changes. So moving forward, Transformation Tuesday is still going to be on Tuesdays, but it's going to be at 10 o'clock in the morning. And again, if you have multiple children and or if you even have just like 2 kids, but they're younger, you know that the longer or the further you get into the day, it just more time for stuff to escalate and or build and or compound, or just the day can get away from you, or there's things that come up, and the longer you wait, like the more opportunity you give for that to happen. So moving forward, as of next week, Transformation Tuesday will still be live. It'll still be on Facebook, but it'll be at 10 a.m. in the morning. And again, if you have several kids, you know that you can't do things too early in the morning because it's just literally an act of God to get up and get anywhere, to do anything, or to be ready to do something early in the morning. So you kind of need something mid-morning. And then after that, once you have the priorities done, then like you feel like you have more freedom to be available for whatever comes up later on in the day and or do other things. So 10 o'clock moving forward. And then June is a month where we are going to be in and out of town, so we may have to switch it on it to do either on a Monday or a Wednesday, but I will always give you a heads up as to what day it will be on if the day changes. But the time's going to move to a mid-morning schedule. So, all right. And then, so it kind of all dovetails into this idea of like giving yourself permission, which is to some people might seem completely crazy and strange, but I feel like the more life you live, like the more you realize you do that. And when I say give yourself permission, I basically just mean you're acknowledging the fact that you need rest or you need space or there's something that you need, and you're willing to give it to yourself without feeling guilty or putting yourself down or condemning yourself or any of the stuff that can come with that. You just, that doesn't happen anymore. You're like, nope, this is what I need. And I know that if I can give myself this time and this space, everything else will be better off for it. Myself, my kids, relationships, any other thing that you're taking care of or you're doing will benefit from you protecting that time to give yourself that space, to give yourself what you need. And so that's what last week was. And then also just to recognize that that happens on like a rhythmic basis within your life. Like you need to give yourself permission to rest, permission to do something that you know that you need to do because it will be beneficial for all of those around you. I'm going to give you a story because that's just what this is. Real life stories of things that hopefully you can learn just by hearing somebody else, and you can spare yourself the pain and the frustration of having to learn it on your own. You can hear from somebody else. So several years ago, I started in direct sales. So I'm going to give you some context, and I'm going to give you the story. So several years ago, I started in direct sales. I was pregnant with my third child, and I figured if I start now, before he comes, I didn't know it was a he at the time, but if I start before the baby comes, I will already have gone through the learning curve, and I'll be in a groove, and I'll be in a rhythm, and I'll know what to do. So whenever the baby comes, there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment time, and then we'll get back into it. And in my mind, at that time, the best way for me to use my gifts and talents and still stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom, because I knew eventually we would be homeschooling. Again, when I was pregnant with my third child, I had a 2.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. So that's a whole nother crazy story in and of itself. But the only way in my mind for me to do all of this and to make all these things work was to do direct sales. And I had been praying about it for about a year beforehand. I had the desire, and I wasn't sure if it would be the best fit for my family and myself. And so instead of just running into something and just making the decision to just do it, I waited and I prayed about it to make sure, A, that the desire lasted, that it wasn't just an idea that I was having, because I'm really great at having ideas. And then sometimes when you get into the follow through and the execution of those ideas, you realize that it's not something that you really want, or it's not going to be a good fit, or that it's not what you thought it was going to be. So I waited to make sure that the desire was something that was going to last. And it wasn't just an idea that seemed great in the moment, but that it was actually something that I really, truly, genuinely wanted to do. And so I did. I waited for a year. And in between that year, I did research on different companies. Anyways, I went with a company, and long story short, that company ended up closing, maybe 2 years into it, the company decided to close. And so I gave myself some time and space. And then at that time, I had a dream about, I have crazy dreams all the time. And I was telling my husband one of my dreams one morning. He said, well, you always talk about how you used to write and how you're such a great writer. Why don't you write a book about it? So I took a dream and I wrote a book. And I was writing this book at the same time I was pregnant with my third child, that I started that direct sales company. And I was also doing a handful of other things. I was obviously several years younger and had much more energy to do all the 17 things I wanted to do at that time. But anyways, so I was writing the book and I was doing the direct sales because in my mind, I was going to be able to achieve the goals faster with a direct sales company than I was with writing a book. Because still back, I don't know how easy it was to self-publish at that time, but it must not have been too easy, and or the idea of doing it must not have been that wide thought or that well known to do without having already been like a previously established author, because it was never even a thought to my mind to do something on my own. I was going about it very traditionally. I was seeking an agent, and in addition to doing direct sales and being pregnant and having 2 kids, and my husband and I were self-employed anyways, so in addition to all the other variables going on. So anyways, fast forward a couple of years, and with the second direct sales company, and again, I had this idea of, I wish I could pursue like the writing and talking about my relationship with God and how I got there and how much has changed my life and how much I know it changes others, and I really enjoy the conversation aspect of that. But again, in my mind, there was no way for me to do that at that time. So I continued with the direct sales. And then I got pregnant with my 4th baby. And at that point, I had found an agent to publish the book. And at the very last minute, it fell through. Book did not get published, but I continued to write. So I had this pull, like I wanted to use my writing and my speaking gifts in order to do and pursue that, but I didn't see a way that I could do that online and have any sort of success. And I was still pursuing the direct sales, which I was with a company that I loved, and I had amazing friendships that I loved that I still have to this day. And so, anyways, fast forward to my 4th baby. And when I had my 4th baby, again, other things were established to a degree. You can hear my 4th baby right now. And then 2020 happened, and everything just kind of like, stood still. And again, at that time, I had that call and that desire. I wanted to pursue the writing and the speaking and the teaching, but I was so tired from the years of doing everything, right? Doing everything all the time and not really giving myself that break. And because I still had that, like if you're an entrepreneur in any sense of the word, like if you've ever worked for yourself or started a business or started a company, like it's not something that you just switch off. It's not something that you just say, oh, I'm done with that now, I'm gonna go. That's just not how it works. There's a call, there's a pull, right? There's something inside of you that has to do it. Like you don't feel like if you have all these creative ideas and you have this desire to express that and to put it out there to help people to connect with somebody else, like you don't just switch that off. And so it was the years of doing all of it and being taught to do it in a way that wasn't the most effective or the most honoring to the other person, right? And all this had kind of come to a head. And at the end of 2020, I remember having a conversation with somebody, and and everything that I was seeing and hearing was something that I wanted to do, but I knew in my heart of my hearts and in my soul, I was tired and that I needed to rest. I had a 1-year-old. It was towards the end of 2020, and we all know what 2020 was, and it was big for everybody. I had a 1-year-old, and as much as I wanted to do it, and as much as I had the pull, and I had the call, and I had the desire, I knew the best thing I could do for myself at that time was to rest. And I remember coming up and remember hearing myself say, this is going to be a season of rest for me. And I gave myself the permission to do that, and it was the first time that I'd had the thought to do that. And so at this point, I had my own business I'd been in direct sales for about 6.5 years at that point. And I never once took like a really good long break. There was a little bit of a break when that first company shut down before I started with the second company. I gave myself a little bit of space, but it wasn't because I was resting, right? It was because there was nothing there, and I wanted to make sure I didn't just jump into another company without thinking about it, without making sure that it would be a good match. So I didn't just allow myself that downtime. At the end of 2020, I was allowing myself the downtime that I needed. And it was the absolute best thing that I ever could have possibly done for myself. There was no guilt, there was no shame, there was no self, you should, you could, why don't you? There was none of that going on in my mind. And when I said that, it was literally everything inside of me just relaxed and released and just let go. There was no expectation. There was no time frame. It was just a season of rest that I was giving myself permission to be in for as long as I needed. And I was just going to enjoy my family as much as, with everything that was going on. My baby was getting ready to turn 1. And I didn't want to put any of that on myself, and so I didn't. And I just took it all off, and I just left it. And I left it alone for a while. And then it was months when, before I finally decided that this was something that I was going to pick up again. And when I picked it back up, I knew I would have more of a focus on the writing, the speaking, being an author, the teaching, the dialogue, the interaction that it is now. So I'm still active with that direct sales company, and I still have a handful of clients that reach out to me who need things, that are loyal and faithful, and thank you so much for that. And I love that, and I really think without that experience, I wouldn't be as prepared for what I'm doing now. I started doing lives with my direct sales company. It's how I got to be more comfortable on camera and in front of a phone and being live and talking and having this type of an interaction, and to even have it be an opportunity or even something in my mind that I would even think would be a possibility for me. All of that came from being in the direct sales space. So I really think that God used that to help prepare me for this. And so when I knew that that season of rest was coming to an end, I knew that with the next thing I did intentionally, and the next thing that I really pursued, and the next thing I really, really wanted to hold close and to pour into, and was going to be with my personal gifts that I have had from the time I was little, that I've been developing and shaping, that I never could put all the pieces together because, again, I'm not going to say how old I am, but when I was a little girl, like, this wasn't a thing. Like, social media didn't exist. It was never a possibility. There was never anything that you could have done, right? That you just, when I am older, I'm going to be online with my own business. That wasn't a thing, right? And so without having that season of rest, I wouldn't have had the creativity. I wouldn't have had the space to be creative. Without giving myself permission to just stop, then I wouldn't have had the ideas. There's lots of ideas that still came that I would just write down, and I just banked them away. There's a ton of ideas that I have to create, products that I want to create, books that I'm going to be writing, courses and classes that I'm going to be teaching. All of those things were just kind of stored and just kind of like held close, and I held them close to me, and I waited because I knew the time wasn't right. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't given myself the permission to do that. And so last week, I had that same kind of a feeling, like I just needed to push pause, so we pushed pause. And so I just want to invite you to think about moments and seasons where you knew you needed to rest and you did so wisely. Maybe you didn't realize how wise it was at that time, but look, in hindsight, you do. And then maybe there were seasons where you knew you needed to rest and you didn't. And then it kind of spiraled either into, there's so many different ways this could go. Frustration, like an angry outburst, depression, an illness, just something else, somewhere else, like getting the brunt of you not resting. Like, where has that happened in the past? That you can, in hindsight, look back and say, oh, maybe if I just would have pushed pause, maybe it would have been for a week, maybe it would have been for a month, maybe it would have been for 6 months. I don't know what the time frame should be for you. I didn't know what the time frame was going to be for me. I know I wrote the first version of my book in early 2020, but it wasn't something that I was that I knew that I was going to be pursuing for like long term. I put it out there, and it did okay. And then again, I let myself have that season of rest, and I didn't really pick it up again until 2021. And I'm trying to remember when I did that. People had asked, because when I originally wrote my first book, it was in a PDF format, and I had been asked over and over and over again, when are you going to put this in paperback? When are you going to put this into a physical product? When are you going to do this? Again, but I was in my season of rest, and I was like, it's coming, it'll happen someday, one day, I don't know when. And then, I think it was the end of last year, I decided I was going to actually try to pursue that. And it was September, October of 2021, so it's almost a year. I'm not saying your season has to be that long, and I'm not saying your season has to be, it's going to be what you need it to be, and I think you should give yourself the time and the space and the permission to do that. That's what I needed for myself, and so I took it. And I'm so glad that I did, and I think there's a lot of other things that are better off for it. Like where my kids are, where I am with my kids, things my husband and I decided we wanted to do and put our time and energy and focus into last year, created space to do that. So this is really just about understanding that there will be moments and seasons where you will need rest, and it's okay, and it's highly suggested and recommended that you give yourself the permission to do that, and then to actually rest and to not feel guilty, and to not feel any sort of shame or guilt or any condemnation. Like, that doesn't fly around here. That has no place in this area, in my life, especially if it comes from me, and especially from anybody else. So none of that. And then recognizing that it can happen on like a broader scale. Like, I needed rest from any sort of external ideas and businesses and things that would take my time and attention away from what was going on at home, like with my kids and during 2020 and homeschooling, and again, still self-employed. So I needed time to put into that. And so I gave myself time to put in that. And then last week, I just needed a week off. So there was like a macro season of rest, and then there was like a little tiny micro season of rest. And I think it's important to just ask yourself, where do I need that in my life? And then to give that to yourself out of grace and out of love, and then being able to fully just sit and receive that rest that you're giving yourself. So that is what I have for you today. So if any of that resonated with you, I would love to hear your story. I would love to hear your experience. And again, I love the white heart emoji. I love the fire flame, and I love the little glitter sparkle emoji. Those three just light me up. They're my favorites. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And I also just want to remind you that next week, Transformation Tuesday is happening at 10 a.m. in the morning. So if you haven't been able to catch me in the afternoon, so maybe the mornings will work out better. And then also moving forward, I may need to change the day to a Monday or a Tuesday depending on travel plans and what we have going on during the summer. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.